So we have more awareness of the problem, but we're also living in heightened fear about it. Where in the past, primarily judgment would have shut down the church. I think these days fear gets in the way because of how public everything is and social media and all of those things. So I think we have greater awareness, but we also have greater fear.
Welcome to What We Really Want, conversations about connection. Settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of What We Really Want. Today is episode 68. It's called We Just Want to Walk with People, and our guests are Troy and Melissa Haas. This is a really special one for me. Stacy and I have been looking forward to talking to Troy and Melissa. This is another couple who is working in the same space that we are. They've been doing it for longer than we have. Troy was one of the first people that I met when we made the decision back in 2015 to start Awaken. We had a mutual friend. My friend and I drove over to Atlanta to take a tour of the HopeQuest Group, which is a therapeutic recovery treatment center that Troy and Melissa started back in 2001. And it was just so encouraging to talk to somebody who had the same kind of story and a similar vision for what he wanted to see God be able to do with the brokenness and the redemption that he had walked through. And here we are 11 years later having a talk with them with a whole lot more water under the bridge, a whole lot more things that have happened. Troy and Melissa have their own recovery story. Troy struggled through multiple addictions in a time of incarceration earlier in his life. Melissa experienced betrayal trauma, similar to how so many women, including Stacy, went through. And out of that, they made a decision to take the healing and the help and the resources that they received themselves and turn it into a way to walk with people. We called the episode, We Just Want to Walk with People, because that's something that toward the end of the conversation, Troy says multiple times, and it resonates so much with Stacy and with me, because that's what we want to do. People walked with us in the lowest point in our lives, and that made all the difference. I mean, people who are Christians say, well, God's the one that made the difference. Yeah, he was. And the way that he did it was by not letting us walk through the darkest and the toughest thing that we ever went through by ourselves. We had a community. We had people who said, you're not the only one, and we're not going anywhere, at a time that other people in our lives did go somewhere because they didn't know what to do with us. There were people who stayed and who walked. And that's something that will always be so special and meaningful to us. I know that it was to Troy and Melissa. And like them, we just want to walk with people as well. We're so grateful for people like Troy and Melissa who have spent their lives and continue to training, becoming better equipped to offer help and healing and hope and everything, all of the above, to people who need it so desperately. They founded the HopeQuest Group. They also started the Walking Free and the Journey recovery communities for sexually addicted men and women going through betrayal trauma. So much overlap between what they're doing and what Awaken is doing. And so it's great to call them friends. It's great to be able to spend some time with them. We hope that this will be a super encouraging conversation for you to sit in on. It's episode 68. It's with Troy and Melissa Haas. It's called We Just Want to Walk with People, and the conversation starts right now.
You know, people with all these tech skills and all you Mac people that, I mean, I'd love to be like y'all, but I'm not, I can't. I'm pretty tech savvy on a PC, but, you know, the tech savvy and PC don't really, those are kind of oxymorons, right?
Yeah, but us Mac people, we're nerdy and insufferable, so.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with that.
Melissa and Troy, so good to have you guys. This is a lot of fun. I feel like we've known you sort of for a long time, but then more recently have really gotten to know you guys, and it makes a lot of sense considering the worlds that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're thrilled to be with you guys. And again, I think you're right. I think we have known one another almost since you guys started.
Yeah.
And yet this is our first time hanging out, and we're really grateful for the opportunity to hang out together.
I remember the first time I met you in person, it was when I came over to Atlanta and you gave us a tour of HopeQuest, of your facilities. And it was just so inspiring because we were just getting started.
Right.
And still in that place that you guys probably remember of like, is this going to turn out to be anything, or are we in and over our heads? And the answer, of course, was yes, we were in over our heads.
Always.
But God can take that and make something.
Well,
That's
just
right.
hanging around with people who've been in it for 15 years longer than us to say, okay, this is okay. Let's keep going. So really excited to hear, to talk to you guys, to have a conversation. And we have a question that we tend to ask all of our guests at the beginning. And I'd love to ask y'all, what do you really want out of the time we're going to spend together today?
Ladies first.
Thank you, honey. I think what I really want out of our time together is that somehow we could add value. And perhaps that value is just feeling known and being heard and being seen to the people who are listening to this podcast and may wonder if there's hope, if there's a way forward. So my hope is that whatever we bring today to this time together would be inspiring and encouraging and hope-filled for people on this journey, because it's hard sometimes to keep sight of that in the midst of the weeds of recovery.
Yeah. And what I would add is for me, I mean, we all know this. Relationships are they're the sweet spot. They're the purpose. They're really the everything of recovery. And when I saw that question, my first thought was just a chance to get to know you guys better and to feel more connected to Greg and Stacy. I mean, we know Greg and Stacy. We pray for Greg and Stacy. We're aware of Roots. Like you said, we've had a lot of overlap between our communities. A lot of walking free guys have been through the Roots Intensive. And so my hope, what I wanted to get out of things was just to get to know you guys and feel more connected.
I love
That's
that.
good.
And I love your use, the use of the words relationships, because there's such a sweetness to it when we find them authentically and safely. But you guys know probably even better than we do, but we both know all of us know really well that for a lot of the people we work with, relationships is like returning to the scene of the crime. We're wounded in relationships, but we heal in relationships. And so, it's a scary thing, but it's a beautiful thing when you find the ones that don't let you down and don't pull the rug out from under you. Well, in the spirit, Troy, especially of what you said first, in getting to know each other better, I'm going to ask you just such a cheeseball like interview type question. We don't do that very much, but like, because we haven't spent much time with you guys, here it is. What is something fun about y'all that most people don't know?
Oh my goodness.
There's so many things.
I love it.
And my first thought is everybody knows everything, but everyone knows the recovery story. But go ahead.
Right.
So what is fun about us? So we often speak in Swahili to each other when we don't want people to know what we're talking about.
Well, that's amazing. I wish we could do that.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful with your children. It's very, very helpful when you're in context where you want to say something and you just
need privacy.
Right.
Well, you have to do it right now a little bit.
Well, tulisha Kenya kwa miaka saba and tunapenda watu wa Kenya
sana na tunajua Mungu alitumia huko kufanya vitu vingi. Vitu vingi.
It could be very inappropriate or it could be beautiful. We wouldn't know.
It was beautiful. And in fact, I don't know any Swahili cuss words. I don't know that there are Swahili cuss words.
There may be, but we don't know them.
Boy, I don't understand a word you just said.
Growing up on the mission field.
Did y'all know about Stacy that she grew up in Africa?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You're an MK?
I was an MK. I am an MK.
Yeah. West Africa, Liberia and Senegal.
Yeah. Senegal, we studied French. I took French for like 5 years, but I didn't use it. So I don't really, I know little phrases, but I can't even do a complete sentence. And then Liberia, they spoke English was the national language, although, very broken. But so, when we learned like a few phrases, greetings and stuff, but I've always been jealous of the missionary kids that know a second language.
I'm feeling jealous now. I'm like,
but
one of these things is not like the others.
You know Spanish a little.
Un poquito. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that I've been looking forward to in getting this conversation set up with y'all is it isn't often, it's been very rare on this podcast that we have gotten to talk to people, not only having your own experience of a recovery story, but like us also taking that addiction and trauma story and starting an organization to help other people.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there are a lot more of us than there used to be, but there still aren't just a boatload of people who have the experience and are channeling it into a very specific type of ministry and nonprofit and help. And I would love it for the people who have not heard of the Haas's or HopeQuest or Walking Free or Journey, just to hear a little bit of y'all's story. I know you've shared it probably 1,000 times. And so you probably got the 5-minute version, the 50-minute version. So just, let us know a little bit more about you guys and how you got to where you are now. We'll be right back.
How have things gotten so out of control? How did something that didn't seem like such a big deal at first completely take over? Porn and sex addiction are destroying your life and killing your relationships. You know you can't keep going on like this, keeping secrets and telling lies. Something has to change. But how? Most men who struggle with unwanted or addictive sexual behavior have tried to fix it on their own. But sex addiction is powerful and complicated. Recovery is possible, but it isn't easy. It requires us to focus on more than just behavior. It requires us to look at our whole lives and the parts of our stories that contribute to addiction. If you're ready to find freedom, maybe it's time for you to get to the roots. The Roots Retreat is a 4-day therapeutic and spiritual intensive. You'll work with therapists and coaches who specialize in sex addiction and recovery. You'll learn how to take healthy ownership of your behavior. You'll discover how your life experiences set the stage for addiction to develop. You'll see how God factors into your struggle, and you'll learn effective tools for ongoing recovery after the retreat. If you're ready to stop trying what doesn't work, if you're ready to experience real hope, healing, and change, let's get to the roots.
Visit awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat or click the Roots Retreat link in show notes.
We'll start.
So I will just say the short version of how we got into the predicament in the first place is that Troy had a ton of trauma that he had not worked on nor resolved. And we were naive to believe that a salvation experience, loving Jesus, would be enough to stop behaviors that had been habituated and were used for emotional regulation and all the things our nervous system prioritizes as a way to survive. And we knew nothing of that. We just knew we loved Jesus. We were going to change the world.
And we loved one another.
We loved one another. We were going to change the world for good. What could go wrong? And I'll let you pick up from there, honey.
When I met Melissa, I was 7 months out of jail, had just been convicted of my second felony drug possession charge, and was a brand new follower of Jesus. And when I met Melissa, it was love at first sight.
For him. He was a thug, y'all.
And
You kind of have that look.
He had that look.
I began to understand that something was still deeply wrong, even though I knew Jesus, even though I was forgiven, even though I was cleansed. I wasn't free. And I began to realize that. As I began to realize that, I was trying to figure out how to be free. And everything I was trying wasn't working. You know, I tried all the spiritual things. And again, I love my Bible. I love church. I love spiritual disciplines. But I was using all of that to try to fix something that it wasn't made to fix. Yeah. And so I shifted my attention towards Melissa and thought if I could be with a beautiful, godly, smart woman, that would certainly fix me, because we all know marriage fixes most everything.
Everything.
And no pressure for me.
Doesn't stir anything up.
No pressure for you, right?
But before we even got married, I think I was aware that my internal life and my internal life was completely out of control. And I was developing, if hadn't already completely developed, this dual life where I was Troy, the pastor, Troy, the future missionary, Troy who loved Jesus and loved to preach the Bible. and then this secret world over here that nobody knew about. All of that, again, seminary, ordination, missionaries on the mission field for 7 years. All of that, God used us in spite of us, which again, God always uses people in spite of people. God always uses us in spite of us. Even today, we're not being used because we've got things figured out and we're good folk now. We're being used because of God's grace and God's mercy. But for us, all of that kind of culminated in this big crash at the very, very end of 1999 that really shocked everybody, very, very much shocked everybody. We were in a Southern Baptist context. And if you've heard of the Lottie Moon Christmas offering for foreign missions, we were the Lottie Moon couple for that year. So our stories and pictures and video went out to 36,000 Southern Baptist churches in 1998. And then in 1999, God said enough and let my sin, my double life be exposed. And so for the next couple of years, what we focused on was recovery. I got honest. We looked at, finally for the first time, I looked at my trauma. I got honest about my trauma. There was a ton of trauma that I had never told anyone about. And we just spent the next couple of years working on our hearts, our lives. I did a ton of individual work. I began to discover the power of group and relationships and finding people that really knew me and still loved me and just being able to be authentic and vulnerable with other people. And we began to work. Melissa's working on her stuff individually and just dealing with betrayal trauma. And I say dealing with betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma wasn't even a thing back then.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, betrayal trauma didn't exist as a concept or as something to be worked on spiritually or psychologically. And so we're just trucking along, working on our individual recoveries, beginning to work on marriage, on our marriage. We had been married at that point a little less than 10 years, and it was a pretty bad marriage.
It was a very bad marriage.
Because my anger, Melissa knew nothing about my sexual sin and my secret double life, but Melissa knew I was always angry, and I was inconsolable when I was angry, and I was controlling and demeaning and gaslighting and all those sort of things. But God, again, he's working in me individually. He's working in Melissa. He's working in us maritally. And as a part of all of that, God opened a door for us to move to Atlanta, Georgia, to Woodstock, Georgia in particular, not to do any work, not to start a ministry, but to continue our journey, our personal recovery. So we got here to Woodstock, and we did more counseling, more individual counseling, more marital counseling. I began to try to find a group, Greg, and I couldn't find a group. I had this wonderful group. I had multiple groups, in fact, in Fresno, California. I couldn't find a group. And I would go to this group of guys on the other side of town. And it felt like my old life in that it was a group of guys that were just trying to encourage one another to just try harder and love Jesus more and, white knuckle it and, snap the rubber band on your wrist when you feel tempted. And I was miserable. I'm like, this is not what has been helping me. And I don't want to, but I was committed to group. I was committed to relationships. And so I began to lament to God and to some friends, I don't know what to do. And God said, why don't you start a group? And so I didn't start a group. I didn't start Walking Free to have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of guys go through it. I started Walking Free because the group I was going in wasn't very good, and I wanted a good group. And that's why I started Walking Free.
And you needed a good group.
I absolutely needed it. And I had no idea what God was going to do. And then shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and then shortly thereafter, I started Journey because, again, it was the same situation. I had experienced community for the very first time, authentic spiritual community in the context of this pain. It was life-changing for me. I grew up in a church system that valued God plus me equals enough, right? And the purpose of living, a mature Christian gives, right? That's what a mature Christian does.
You don't have needs.
You don't have needs. You just go and serve. And
Jesus is all you need.
Jesus is all you need, except that's not biblical. So,
just that one little thing.
The correct equation is God plus me plus the body of Christ equals enough. So there was definitely nothing for women. There were nothing for spouses. I found a couple of women who had, been betrayed in their marriages, but they really actually were just surviving. They weren't thriving. And so after God did some pretty significant work in my heart, just him and me. I started Journey in 2002, in January of 2002. And we still have groups today. And because I wanted to create an environment where women's pain could be both honored and transformed. And God has been very faithful in that.
And then just to put a bow on the walking free and journey piece of that, at the same time, God was stirring in one of the other pastors at church and another young man at church. And we began to, because my story is not just sex addiction, my story is addiction. I began to smoke in the 5th grade. I began to drink in the 5th grade. I began to use drugs in the 6th grade. I had a major significant drug habit. I'm a twice convicted felon because of felony possession of a controlled substance. Drugs were a huge part of my story, sex even bigger. And so I began to have this heart for people in the church that struggle with addiction because the church doesn't know what to do with addiction. They do a little bit better job with substance addiction, with drugs and alcohol,
right,
and accelerated recovery and those sort of things. The church really doesn't know what to do with porn and sex addiction. But the reality is, what we felt God calling us to do at that point was walking with people in a more deep way than just a support group environment. And so that's HopeQuest was born out of that, and pulling guys together that needed a more residential context where they could step into a healing context with other men. And our original program was a year-long program, and that's just not practically workable. And so very quickly we made some shifts. We had no idea what we were doing. There wasn't a model. There was not a Christ-centered, clinically effective residential addiction treatment program anywhere in the country at that point. Yeah. And so we began to build at HopeQuest, not just the walking free and journey groups, but then this residential program that ended up being a 90-day residential program that's Christ-centered, clinically effective. And no matter what your addiction is, we're going to walk with you, and we're going to help you not just white knuckle things and not just learn to manage your behaviors, but to find true and lasting freedom by resolving trauma and repairing attachments and bringing true deep healing that only God can bring, but God uses all of the tools to help bring that true and lasting freedom.
Well, that's a great transition into talking a little bit more about HopeQuest. And obviously you've stated your credentials, because from an addiction standpoint, Troy, I mean, you're an overachiever. I mean, starting at 10 or 11 years old. I mean, if anybody knows his stuff about addiction, that's right. That's right. Not so much lately.
One of the things I'm good at.
But you were responding a lot, Hun, to the things that Melissa was sharing. And
yeah. Well, one of the things that you addressed was, I was curious, if you knew prior to 99, anything as far as.
Oh, that's a great question. I actually did it. I knew that Troy had been promiscuous in his past. And I knew actually we struggled with sexual purity in our relationship. That was a source of great shame for me and for him.
Same.
And then, you get married and magically, yay, it's legal. And
supposed to be
and actually
free
right. And actually it got worse after that, right? It seemed like his desire was less for me, and I couldn't make sense of that. And so I knew that the big issue in our marriage before we left for the mission field was more his reactivity, his emotional reactivity.
Okay, yeah.
And we did some counseling about that in our premarital work, but neither one of us understood trauma. Neither one of us understood what was happening for him in these moments.
And I wasn't being honest with myself or anyone. So
sure.
So I on the mission field, I began to have really deep, like, nervous system responses to, I knew something was incredibly wrong. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was incredibly wrong. I woke up one day and remember thinking, he doesn't love me. And so I was walking around in a lot of pain, and his reactivity got off the charts worse. And I was blaming culture shock and all of the things, which, I mean, it's true. It was very hard, but I didn't know about the secret life. There were times that I had glimmers, and looking back, they were glimmers God gave me that I just ignored or denied because no, that couldn't be true. But it wasn't until God blew it up for us that I really understood. And then even then, Troy denied everything
at first.
And so it wasn't until several months later that I really got the whole of it.
Yeah.
So, and it was very much a dribbled, staggered disclosure, which was painful. I hate the dribbled method.
Yeah, it's torturous.
And we actually went through recovery in a time when a formal therapeutic disclosure process was not a thing. So these were many conversations between the two of us in private without a counselor present, where we tried to do the best we could. So yeah, it was definitely a limp through the process kind of recovery. And I give credit to God and some caregivers who were doing the best they could with a really hard situation.
Isn't it amazing that, well, let me just say, it's amazing to me when I think about you guys 25 or so years ago, us 17 years ago when our lives blew up. So before most everything that's available for people today was available and able to be found. I mean, I would never want to, suggest that a couple going through what all of us went through do so without some of the tools and the resources and the processes. But even without those, like you really can't stop a loving God from healing people who want to be healed and want to surrender to a process. And when the processes and the resources are supporting that instead of like, oh, without that, you're screwed. I mean, I love that perspective. And Again, I don't want to say, okay, well, the way that we did it without any help at all is the way to do it, because I don't think any of us would say that it is. So despite that, we can clearly see God, but even in the midst of it, that's also God.
Yeah, God gives us what we need at the moment and what's available, and people do the best they can. Thank God we learn. Thank God we don't do things that way anymore. And here at HopeQuest, one of the things we do in our residential program is we do a full therapeutic disclosure with every client, and we have robust spouse support for spouses who've experienced betrayal trauma, because we know the importance of that, and no one should have to go through this process without that spouse support, that wife support as a betrayed spouse, and that full therapeutic disclosure, because we know, the four of us know how difficult and painful. It's bad enough today. We don't want anyone to have to go back to that old way.
Well, when you were talking about the founding and the development of HopeQuest, you used a phrase. So people who've been listening to the show for a while, I've probably given 3 or 4 references that let people know how much I love Ted Lasso. And I'm not a soccer fan. Like, I don't know everything I know about English soccer and the Premier League. I know from watching that show. One thing that I do know is that the fans are really creative with coming up with taunting chants. And one of the ones that I remember from the first season is, "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing." And like that, you said that it was that was where you were when you were starting this thing. And it kind of folds into one of the few questions I wrote down to ask you, looking at what HopeQuest is now and what you guys offer now, because you've got like a high intensity outpatient program. You talked about 90 days. People can do their 90 days, but if residential is not an option, they can come and spend a lot of time during the week, and it's focused. But then you've also got the residential 90-day program. The way that you're doing things now, is this what the vision was, or have there been so many tweaks and adjustments and, okay, well, that didn't work? I mean, what has the path between then and now looked like?
Yeah, Greg, great question. I would say the vision was walk with people in the way that you've been walked with. And as we began to try to figure out how to do that, we quickly realized we don't know what we're doing. And so we began to reach out to people, and we began to ask for help. And I remember Marnie Faree was one of our first calls. I can't even remember how I bumped into Marnie or how I met Marnie, but I was amazed at just her story and the things that she had built there at Bethesda. And so I called Marnie up and I said, "Hey, can we come to Nashville and we just sit down with you for a few hours?" And she said, "Sure." And, we had a couple of other people like that.
Mark Glazer.
That were beginning to do that work or had been doing that work for a while. So we just began to ask questions. We began to read. We began to pray. Melissa went back to school. Several of our staff, when you look at like our executive team, our two clinical directors were one was an Air Force medical doctor, and one was a pastor, and they both went back to school, and they both now are brilliant clinicians. Melissa went back to school. Melissa was a school teacher. She didn't have any clinical skills or experience. Her clinical skills and experience were as a client. She knew how to be a client. So we learned, we asked questions, we prayed, we tried to always look at what we were doing through the lens of, how can we do this better? How can we more deeply help people? We knew what it was like to have obstacles, and we knew what it was like to not know how to move forward. And so we just began to say, okay, God, how do we help people overcome those obstacles? How do we help people learn to move forward? And, looking at all of that, we began to kind of just walk with people. And even the Walking Free and Journey materials, we didn't write those books and then create a group around them. We were doing group for a couple of years before we wrote the materials. And the materials kind of bubbled up out of this journey of walking with people. I mean, we were running 50, 60, maybe 100 guys before we ever had any materials. Because again, I wasn't smart enough to write the materials ahead of time. But as we're walking with people, the process and the ways and the direction were bubbling up to the surface. And then we're just trying to make sense of that and put it into a coherent fashion. So that's when I say we didn't know what we were doing. We really had no idea, but we knew how to pray. We knew how to ask for help. We knew how to find people that were further down the road than us. And that's what we did.
And I will just add to that. We did have a framework for what God did in us. And so there were pieces of it that we knew we wanted to have that were life-changing for us. And there were pieces that we knew we wanted to avoid that were not helpful for us. And so I think one of the things I really love about God's redemptive purposes is he doesn't waste pain and he doesn't waste experience. So even my experience as a school teacher, when I started writing curriculum for spouses, all of my English classes, right, were used by him because I can write.
That's true.
And even though Troy had never started a rehab before, he's got great people skills and networking skills, and missionary / pastor equals good sales. And so all of that, God doesn't waste the gifts he's given us, and it all coalesces into something beautiful when we follow him.
You're so right.
So true.
It's funny because one of the jobs that I had after I lost my pastoral role when my addiction got exposed in 2009 was selling cars. Right. And I've heard there are so many former ministers who are really, really good car salesmen.
Greg, I sold cell phones. So when we first got here to Woodstock for 2 years, as we were getting things rolling, I sold cell phones. Yep. Sold a lot of them.
If you are a relational person, if you're a curious person, and if you are comfortable talking with people, I mean, you can do great in sales. And the fourth thing is if you're honest. That's the thing that a lot of people miss.
But what about me? Because I tried to sell a few things along the way and I failed because I'm like, I mean, I like it. If you want it, it's like,
you probably don't, it's fine. I'm sorry I'm even here.
You and Melissa are too honest. There's a line there that you shouldn't go over in your honesty, and y'all are too honest.
That's so true. But man, this field, which I never would have in a million years, who says, "Oh, this is what I want to do"? Because
nobody
often comes out of your experience. Yeah, but I do feel not confident in a way that's like I know what I'm doing, but I have experienced it. So I am not afraid in the things that I say, or I feel very bold to be able to say a lot of the things. A lot of things I say, I'm like, oh, I don't know how this is going to land. But it's just interesting to me, to your point of God doesn't waste our gifts. Like I didn't know till I was, when did this all happen?
38, 37.
Yeah, 37 years old. And then it's like doing this, I feel like this is why I'm here. Like I really didn't know before. I mean, being a wife and a mom, wonderful, loved it, still love it. But this just feels like I'm doing what God had called me to do.
Yeah. People have said, how did you guys come to do what you're doing? I'm like, well, what you do is you look at where the money and the prestige are,
Go the other way.
And then you turn around and you walk the opposite direction.
Following Jesus is never safe, and it rarely leads you to wealth.
That's right.
Well, hey, I want to maybe get into one more thing in the time that we have. And it kind of links back to something, Troy, that you said, not in passing, but just as a part of your story near the beginning, when you said something to the effect of the church just doesn't really understand much about this. And I think you said, it's better now than it was, which is definitely true. Yeah. But there's still a huge gap in between what you and I, what the four of us would say needs to be the aptitude of ministry leaders, the understanding and the skill set versus what it actually is. We just interviewed Kristen Jensen, who wrote the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures books. And we met her in 2016 at the Set Free Summit, which was, y'all were there too, weren't you?
I was, Melissa wasn't.
Yeah, I think that may be where I met you.
That's where so many of us met for the first time face to face.
Yeah, that's right. Just one of the things that Barna released was this comprehensive study that they had done on the church and pornography. Mm-hmm. And one of the most depressing or riveting, whatever you want to say, statistics was that I think it was 88% of pastors say that pornography is the greatest or one of the greatest threats to the church. And 8% of churches have any solution that they have that they have to offer. So there's an 80-point gap between knowing that it's a problem and actually doing something about it. Now, we hope and we believe that in the last 10 years, that's gotten a little bit better. There's still a lot of improvement. Here's that long windup is leading to a question that I want to hear from y'all's experience. What have you noticed regarding how the church approaches addiction, specifically sexual addiction and betrayal trauma, not only in what are they doing about it, but even how do they feel about it? Do you still experience a lot of leaders resisting even acknowledging sexual addiction as a thing? Do you experience a lot of the skepticism towards psychology and psychological modalities? Just like you said, we love Jesus, that being enough. How has it been? How do you notice that it is now? I'm just curious as to your experience with that.
Yeah, of all the catchphrases or descriptors of HopeQuest that I love, the one I probably love the most is we call ourselves and we strive to be the church's resource for addiction help.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
The church even those that are well-meaning and believe that it exists, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know what to do. So you do have still a very large subsection of the church that sees it only as a spiritual problem and sees
a sin problem,
a spiritual problem with spiritual solutions, and would completely be dismissive of counseling, psychology, integration, trauma, attachment, all of those sort of things. And I don't know what to do about those folks other than to pray for them and trust that God, just like God always brings us to an end of ourselves and always brings us to a place of desperation if we'll allow him. So we just pray for folks that are in that camp. But there are a growing number of pastors and churches that would say, I believe this is real. I've seen too much destruction. I have seen too many marriages. I have seen too many people hurt by addiction, sex addiction and pornography in particular. I just don't know what to do. And so I think we're at a place, Greg, where we in this space of helping others have got to figure out how to bring some practical help and practical tools to the church and to become, as we call ourselves here at HopeQuest, the church's resource for addiction help. Because their pastors are so busy and they have so many things pulling on them. They don't have the time, even if they care and believe in the reality of sex addiction, they don't have the time to address it in a healthy way. So we've got to figure out how to bring practical help to the church and to pastors and leaders.
Well, I'd see what you said and raise it with the additional truth that most churches in America are under 200 people.
Yes.
And so the pastors are busy, and they also don't have the budget to hire a designated staff person to do this. I mean, thankfully, some churches can and have done that.
Right.
And they've brought clinical psychologists who has their theology masters as well, and they're bringing that integrated approach. But most churches can't do that.
Yeah, that's correct.
And so to figure out a way to offer an easy on-ramp to partnership is huge.
I had a thought.
Well, I'd love for you to share it. I didn't.
Raise my hand?
I just thought you were saying I just thought you were doing a hallelujah.
Well, I'm just thinking about okay, we go to church and we find out we're sick. We go to a doctor and the church doesn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
They don't know how to care for us in our sicknesses physically.
Yeah.
So is it more what I have heard and what I experienced myself was it's not so much that I have to fix all of this within the church. It's more like if people go to them and they get the deer in the headlights look, or I don't know what to do, that just adds to the feelings, because sex addiction is so, I don't know, there's just something different about it than alcohol and drugs. But even those, you send people to places for healing from drug and alcohol, but you need it to be not something that feels shameful. So it's more about the silence of it in the church, I think.
No, I think you're spot on, because you're right. And that's why I said we want to come alongside the church. We want to help the church, because the church they don't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal. But you're right. At least if they would not get in the way and they would point folks towards real, genuine help, and they would help resource that help as best they can, I think the church can make a huge difference. And the church can be a real purveyor of freedom, which would be the heart of most pastors. But you're right. We would look at a church that says, "Oh, you have cancer? Do not go see an oncologist. Let's just pray. Don't do chemo. Don't do radiation. Don't see a doctor. Just pray." There would be no way we would approach diabetes or lung disease or cancer or heart disease. None of that. But that's what we do.
There are a few people who do that, but it's definitely the microscopic minority.
Yeah,
that would be very much the minority, and that would be seen as pretty aberrant for mainstream evangelical Christianity. And so I think, Stacey, you're exactly right. We've got to help churches see it for what it really is and see the solution for what the solution really is.
Just anecdotally, I think what I'm seeing more and more in churches, especially with younger leadership, pastors who are millennials or pastors who grew up with the internet, there is an understanding more that this can be a problem. And I think there's a greater openness in talking about pornography addiction, sexual addiction. I think in the church, the problem becomes because it is so harmful in relationship. Sexual betrayal is so harmful. And because it also has very scary consequences sometimes. And all of the, everything is broadcast on social media. Everything, there's no secrets anymore. And people make big judgments and cancel and all of the things. We're living in heightened, so we have more awareness of the problem, but we're also living in heightened fear about it. And I think that where in the past, primarily judgment would have shut down the church, some kind of judgment statement that this is just an issue, you need to get over it and repent, or you're just screwed up, please leave, we don't want you here. Judgment would have gotten in the way. I think these days fear gets in the way of people asking for help or seeking help because of how public everything is and social media and all of those things. So I think we have greater awareness, but we also have greater fear.
Yeah.
And that is a piece we need to address as the body of Christ.
Well, I love what you're saying about identifying what's getting in the way. If I can find out what the objection is, if I can find out what the person in ministry is scared of as it relates to psychology and these modalities, And I mean, sometimes the answer is obvious because there are some psychologists who say what you need is to walk away from religion.
Right.
And, and so, yeah, that's a part of it. But there are so many who aren't. And a good therapist, even if they are an atheist, is going to defer to the religious preferences of their client. They're not going to try to work their own ethics into it. They're going to support what their client wants. So it's kind of like when I sold cars, right? I'm not there to sell you a car. I'm there to figure out what's keeping you from buying a car and address those objections. And so like, I feel like that's one of the things that can help us. If the two things that are obstacles of ministries like ours and the church working together is, I don't know what to do. Well, we can help really easily with that. But if it's like, we don't need what you're offering, I guess we could shake the dust off our sandals, or we could say, tell me more about, why you're so opposed to this, and let us speak to that a little bit. Have you had opportunities in your world to do any of that?
I would say, I think the relational approach when we encounter resistance is God's way.
Yeah.
When I look at what Jesus modeled, as he said things that the establishment could not take in about them, about God's, they could not take it in, and they killed him for it. Actually, he always chose a relational way, and so the reality is, as we are walking around on this planet, in having been redeemed and restored out of our own brokenness, our mission, and this is what I love about you guys, is to join people and walk with them for a minute. And they can take what they need and leave the rest.
There you go.
But we don't lose our mission because of their capacity. And we remain committed to the relationship, which is love, because God is love. And I think that's the stance we have in all that we do.
Yeah, and I think being curious about what's going on in a person's heart, you can never go wrong. Trying to avoid judgment, trying to avoid certainty, trying to avoid assuming you know what's going on, getting curious about someone's heart, listening. You can't go wrong with that. You may not come to a place where y'all can work together, but at least you have done what you can. And I will say this as well. There's all sorts of politics and fighting on both extremes, both edges. One of the things that we've always tried to do here, I'm grateful for the ministries and the people who are called to, be on those edges and fight against some of those things. That's not us. We just want to walk with people, and we want to help people experience freedom. I know what it's like to live in bondage. I know what it's like to be a follower of Jesus and not know how to get unstuck from sin and addiction. And we just want to walk with people so that people can not just be alive in Christ, but people can be free in Christ.
Well, and to maintain that curiosity, and maybe this can be a sort of a closing thought, to be able to maintain that curiosity, we all know can only happen when a person is generally emotionally regulated. Because when we're hypo or hyper aroused, we lose our ability to be curious.
Yes.
And we instantly become self-protective, judgmental, because we got to survive.
See people as threats.
Yeah.
Right.
Melissa, you were talking about what you learned about what had been going on with Troy before you guys were together. You used the term emotional regulation. And, hearing you speak at the retreat of several weeks ago, was just talking about our window of tolerance. And, maybe we'll have a deeper conversation about that sometime. But just when we are in a situation where our buttons are getting pushed, we find ourselves either wanting to shut down or our blood is boiling, we will lose the ability to be curious. And so the fact that you just said, hey, we just want to walk with people. We've been through this. Hey, if you want to pick up what we're laying down, that's great. I mean, I think that is typically, not exclusively, but that's typically the mindset of a person who is at peace, and if you like what we do, join us. If you don't, then God be with you, and hopefully more people will find that the types of solutions that y'all are trying to offer, that we're trying to offer, that so many other people now are trying to offer, maybe it's better than the thing you keep cycling through and winding up at the same frustrating place. And so, when you're ready, I mean, have you ever seen somebody really go far in recovery who is trying to accept it being forced on them?
No.
We heal when we're ready to surrender. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You guys have walked with so many hundreds, probably thousands of people in that, and God's given us the same opportunity, and just so thankful, so grateful to get to be there. There's some weeks it's so heavy, some seasons where it's just everybody seems to be going through the dark times. And that's why I think it's good for people who do what we do to know each other, so we can kind of commiserate and refuel. That's it. That's it. But thank you guys for what you do. And thank you for spending some time with us and being some of our newer friends.
Well, likewise. And we so appreciate you guys and how God's using y'all, and look forward to some more time together.
God bless you guys. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, click the Send Us a Message link in the show notes of any episode.